I've always wondered what really makes me the way that I am. I'm gay. Fabulously gay. And I'm trying to figure out how men like me could have survived evolution.
Filmmaker Bryce Sage has had a big question on his mind ever since he came out of the closet. How is evolution compatible with the existence of gay men?
We've definitely survived the dog-eat-dog world of evolution. So why haven't gay men become extinct? Like the dinosaurs who used to roam around this place.
I may not know much about that natural selection business, but what I do know is we gay guys don't reproduce, and we seem to have stuck around for a real long time. So why haven't we become extinct?
Bryce has spent years wondering about this gay conundrum.
Darwin, you've got some explaining to do.
When Bryce Sage was growing up in rural Ontario, he knew he was different. He came out of the closet at age 19 after he moved to Toronto. He's comfortable with who he is now, but he's often wondered why he's attracted to men rather than women.
I'd say that ever since I even started to question, who I was in terms of my sexuality, I've wondered, was I born this way? There was always this burning question. I'm probably not going to reproduce, so why am I gay? Why is anyone gay?
Bryce sets out to find a biological explanation for his sexuality. His first stop is Chicago's Northwestern University, where he's meeting with key members of the Human Sexuality Lab.
So what do you guys do here?
We study various aspects of human sexual orientation, such as women's sexuality. We've done studies with twins. We've even studied gay dancers.
Gay dancers?
Yeah, it turns out that if you do ballet, you're more likely to be gay.
Well, somebody had to figure that out. So what kind of research are you guys doing now?
So right now we're doing studies of sexual psychophysiology of men's sexual orientations.
Okay, so if you're like gay, straight, or bi.
No, those are sexual identity labels. So that's something that a person tells you they are.
Bryce has already told the scientists that he's gay, but they want more than self-reporting.
There's a measure of sexual arousal that we use called penile plethysmography that doesn't rely on self-report, where we measure a man's erections to different kinds of erotic stimuli.
So it's kind of like a polygraph for your penis then?
Exactly.
Who'd have thought I'd have to do a test to determine if I'm gay or not? I thought that part was pretty apparent.
So how's this gonna happen?
Okay, so what you'll be doing is you're going to be watching a couple of gay scenes. You'll also be watching a couple of lesbian scenes. And while you watch them, I need you to have that gauge on. You'll be completely still.
And are we sure this will be big enough?
It'll be pretty snug on your penis. And it'll stretch when you get aroused to eclipse.
By measuring the blood flow to Bryce's penis, the PPG will determine if Bryce is attracted to men or women.
I'm all ready. That wasn't weird at all. So what did the test say about my pee-pee?
So if you look here, this red line is what your penis was doing throughout the entire assessment. This is when you were watching lesbian video, and you can see here your arousal's pretty much flat across the whole thing. Now this is what you did when you were watching one of the gay sex scenes. You can see that within the first minute or so, you have this dramatic increase in your genital arousal, and that stays up there for the entire time that video is playing. Countless studies have demonstrated that men's sexual orientations are their arousal patterns, really. In other words, that if you're homosexual, that you're strongly aroused by men and attractive men, and that you experience little to no arousal to attractive women.
So this says that I'm 100% unequivocally homosexual.
That's right.
And that I was born that way.
No. We would need more data in order to answer the question of whether or not you were born gay.
What can we do to figure that out?
One way we might get more information about that is to see where your erections are coming from, which is, of course, your brain.
I guess that makes sense. What's going on downstairs must be controlled by something going on upstairs. I need to figure out what that is.
All right, so we're gonna go over a little bit of the safety procedure. Make
Okay.
sure that you don't have any metal on you before you go into the magnet.
I'm pretty sure I'm okay.
All right, we'll check that out. After that, we'll put you in a very sexy hospital gown.
Fitted, of course, right?
Yes, very, very fitted. So this is our scanner. We're gonna put you in it and we're gonna show you 4-second clips of erotic material.
4 seconds? Are you sure that's enough to measure anything?
Unlike our last study where we measured your genital arousal, this time we're gonna look for deeper pathways in the brain.
Before arousal happens in the genitals, it first occurs in the brain. This scan may show that Bryce's arousal patterns are something more than a choice.
I've got an itch on my nose. Can I scratch it?
The focus here is the limbic system, the parts of the brain known to regulate instinctive sexual responses. These scans may reveal some clues about the biological nature of Bryce's sexuality.
All right, looks like we're all finished. I'm gonna come in and get you.
I think all these vaginas might have turned me. Just warning you.
Although the MRI is complete, Bryce's results won't be available for a couple of days.
Looks like I've got some time to kill, so I'm gonna do some research of my own into this nature versus nurture business. What better place to start than where it all began? My mom and dad.
Bryce decides to check in with his family about their memories of him during the formative years.
I'm on this journey to figure out what makes me gay. Part of that's like figuring out if I was actually born gay or if you did something to make me gay along the way.
When you told me that you were gay, I was still surprised. I had no idea.
So like when I came out, you didn't see it coming at all?
No.
And what about the sports thing? You said that I...
Oh, yeah, well, you always threw like a girl, but that's an insult to all the girls in the world, right?
You were just different. I mean, when I compare you to Corey, it was night and day.
How's it going?
Pretty good, how are you?
Good.
What do you remember about when I came out?
Well, actually, I was having a party when you called me and let me know, and you ended up telling me that you were gay. The party went silent, because I just was like, no, you're not. I was pretty homophobic at the time, so... But yeah, for the first bit, I wanted to kick the right out.
Do you think that I chose to be gay?
No, I don't think anybody ever chooses. I don't ever remember choosing to be straight.
These are when you're older, obviously.
Oh, wow, look at this mullet.
Look at my geek son.
Look at this one. We couldn't be more different.
Quite a difference. But then there always was in my son's. Because he'd want to go outside to play, and he wanted to throw a ball around and ride his bike. You didn't want to do any of those things, so I think that's one of the reasons that you weren't close. It started at a really young age.
I don't remember doing girly things when I was younger. Like, I never really dressed up as a girl or played with dolls.
I don't either. This was more your interest. It was drawing, it was coloring, it was video games, reading.
Ooh, look at this one.
Isn't that unbelievable? But that was after you had come out. You were living in Toronto.
I should hope so. So how am I doing? Do I still throw like a girl?
You sure do.
Bryce and his brother are certainly different, but are these differences the result of biology, upbringing, or a mix of both?
Got a message here. My results are in Chicago.
For what?
My brain results. I'm gonna find out if I'm gay.
I think we have enough evidence on that.
So what am I looking at? So what we're looking at is a vision of your brain going from side to side. And anything that's red is a part of your brain that was more active when you were looking at pictures and videos of men relative to when you were looking at pictures and videos of women.
So what part of the brain is reacting?
So this is the limbic system here, which is this ancient sort of primordial part of the human brain.
The limbic system is where our most primal thoughts originate. It governs subconscious processes like hunger and the sex drive.
This is the part of the brain that's responsible for the 4 F's, which is feeding, biting, fleeing, or mating.
But that doesn't start with an F.
Yeah, I'll let you figure that one out.
From an evolutionary perspective, these instinctive parts of the brain are considered to be ancient. This primitive brain existed long before the development of the thinking brain that allows us to control our instincts.
So what does this say about sexuality being like set or a choice?
So it suggests that there is something hardwired about your sexuality here when we're just looking at your responses to men versus women. From studies like these, as well as the other theories that we have and all of the other data, male sexual orientation is something that is set from birth, if not earlier.
It seems like the science does say I was more than likely born gay. It's not exactly the biggest surprise in the world, but it's definitely reassuring. The thing is, it doesn't say what made me gay to begin with. And why me? Why not my older brother, Corey?
Strange as it seems, the fact that Corey was born first may be significant. To find out more, Bryce heads to Brock University.
What exactly is the fraternal birth order effect?
The fraternal birth order effect is the name that I gave to the finding that older brothers increase the odds of homosexuality in later-born males.
Repeated studies have shown that every time a woman has a boy, it increases the likelihood that the next son she has will grow up to be gay.
Each older brother increases the odds of homosexuality by roughly 33%.
33%? That's a pretty huge number. If a mother has a son, the next son has a 33% chance of turning out gay?
No. You're starting out with a very small base rate. If the probability of a first son being gay is 2%, the probability of a fifth-born son, a fifth son, goes up to 6%. So it triples, but it's still only 6%.
Why does having older brothers increase your chances of turning out gay?
Nobody knows for sure, but there's only one organ system in the mother's body, aside from her brain, of course, that would have the, quote, memory to know how many male fetuses she's carried, and that's the immune system.
Blanchard and his colleague Tony Bogart are studying how a mother's immune system might play a part in the sexual orientation of her sons. They believe an immune response to carrying boys instead of girls could be responsible. If so, there might be lingering evidence in the mother's blood. They are analyzing the blood of mothers of both gay and straight sons to find out.
I have an older brother, so maybe I could ask my mom to volunteer her blood.
Well, I'm sure Tony would be delighted to have your mother participate as long as she lives within 2 hours of Brock University, because the blood has to be processed very quickly.
2 hours?
That's
It's a race against the clock. Hey, Mom. Can we take your blood? Apparently there's this theory that you made me gay by having Corey first. So Kasha in here needs to take your blood to find out if that's true. We gotta go, but thank you, Mom. We're running out of time. Ciao, how's it looking?
It's looking great. I actually just counted 150 live cells. This means that we just retrieved 7 million cells from your mom's blood.
Does that mean you can use the sample?
Absolutely. This is a really good recovery.
Can I take a peek?
Sure. Go ahead.
What am I looking at?
Well, we're looking for evidence of an immunological reaction that may have occurred when you were just a little fetus.
When a child develops as a male, he produces male-specific proteins, which are considered foreign in the pregnant mother's womb. The immune system in her blood produces anti-male antibodies. The scientists hypothesize that the lingering effects of this response could make subsequent sons gay.
If a mom has an immunological reaction against these male-specific proteins, a person's sexual orientation may be diverted from heterosexuality to being gay.
Is this what is making me gay?
We don't know for sure, okay? We have to test groups of moms.
The blood from Bryce's mom will be processed and studied with the samples from up to 200 other mothers.
How many gay men are gay because of the fraternal birth order effect?
It's not a huge effect, but it's an important effect. It's about 15%.
15%, that's it?
Sorry.
Well, that's definitely disappointing. Even if this so-called fraternal birth order effect really is accurate, it apparently only accounts for 15% of us. And the scientists don't even know for sure what's making it happen. What about the rest of us, the other 85% of us?
Could a gay gene be responsible for Bryce's sexual identity? A scientist working with twins may have the answer.
I'm here in La La Land to track down the guy who first discovered the so-called gay gene.
Bryce's hunt for the elusive gay gene takes him to the sun-soaked shores of Southern California. Here he meets geneticist and National Institutes of Health scientist, Dean Hamer.
I understand that you made a pretty big discovery about 20 years ago?
20 years ago, we discovered for the first time a specific gene that's associated with sexual orientation.
And how did you find it?
Well, we started by studying the families of gay men, and we found something really unexpected, which is that they tended to have most of their gay relatives on the mom side of the family. And that was really important because it said there might be something on the X chromosome, which only comes down to the mom side of the family.
In the early 1990s, Hamer's team looked at the genetic makeup of 40 pairs of gay brothers. They identified a region of the X chromosome they labeled XQ28. XQ28 carried similar gene factors in a majority of these gay men. So XQ28 was associated with homosexuality. 20 years later, these results have been replicated in a national study, 10 times the sample size of Hamer's.
Is it right to think of it as the gay gene?
No, often journalists make things simple, and so they talk about the gay gene, but they really should have been talking about the gay genotype or a network of genes. There might be dozens or even hundreds of different genes.
That doesn't sound as easy and colorful.
It's not as easy, but it's reality. And that's fine because most complicated traits, like sexual orientation, probably have many different genes that are involved.
Why do we know that there's a genetic influence to being gay?
Well, long before geneticists like me were able to actually look at DNA, we had other ways to see if traits were genetic. And the classic is to look at twins. Identical twins have exactly the same DNA, so if a trait's genetic, then they should be the same. And indeed, if one twin is gay, the other one usually is, or at least a lot more than you would expect by chance alone.
The typical rate for homosexuality among the general population is around 3%. So what might the rate be for identical twins? Twin studies conducted over the last few decades have shown some interesting results.
These tests showed that when one identical twin was gay, that about half the time, the other twin was straight. Now, if identical twins have identical DNA, shouldn't both twins be gay?
Well, twins have exactly the same DNA sequence, but they might have slight differences in the way the DNA is expressed. And that's a whole new field that scientists are studying really hard right now.
Now, why do you think it's so important that scientists like yourself look for a biological basis to homosexuality?
Even though it shouldn't make any difference whether a person is gay because they choose to be or because they're born that way, the truth is that it does. It affects other people's attitudes. It affects their understanding of why people are gay. So it's really important to have the facts, to have the knowledge, to have the scientific information that allows people to understand why people are gay.
The whole reason I set out on this quest is to figure out why gay guys exist, and Dean just provided a key piece of the puzzle. He confirmed that there is definitely a genetic influence to being gay. It isn't some magical gay gene, it's probably multiple genes, but the fact of the matter is that there are genes that influence our sexuality. That's huge. Like, that means I'm on the right track. There is something in my nature, in our nature as gay men, that makes us gay. Now it's time to just figure out why these genes exist.
On the advice of Dean Hamer, Bryce heads over to meet Eric VILAIN and his team at the Center for Gender-Based Biology at UCLA. They're recruiting identical twins where one is gay and the other is straight, to try and understand why they have different sexual orientations.
With regards to the twin studies, what kind of research are you doing with them? Like, what are you looking for?
Right, so what we're trying to understand is why those twins that are identical genetically are so different on something that fundamental about who we are, who we're attracted to. So it's quite impressive that such an important feature of who we are as human beings is so different in identical twins. So we are trying to measure, not the environment because it's too complicated to measure it, but we know it has to do with the environment, so we measure the effect of the environment on the DNA.
And what's that called?
That's called epigenetics.
Epigenetics.
So literally, epi means above.
Above, all right.
Above the genes.
So instead of simply scanning the genome to identify specific gay genes, VILAIN and his team want to understand how the same genes in separate individuals might act differently.
One of you guys is gay and one of you is straight. Okay. And you're gonna figure out exactly what is responsible for making
Well,
this
what we'll
happen?
try to see is what is the differences between their two DNA profiles.
So why would you participate in a study like this?
Maybe get some answers to questions we've had all our lives, yeah. It'd be interesting to know why.
Yeah. I'm on a similar journey to sort of figure out exactly why any of us are gay to begin with. You know, why would something like that have evolved for the first place?
Yeah.
And maybe Cisco here can give us some of the answers.
Yeah, so once we finish collecting their saliva, we'll go ahead and cap their vials and then send that off for sequencing to try to see how they may differ from one another. With twins, even though they're built off of the same exact DNA blueprint, there are different events that may have occurred to each twin that can affect how the DNA is then modified and expressed later on.
If I understand it right, there could be some factors that are turning on the genes that predispose these guys to being gay? Is that...
Right, if you want to think of it like a row of light switches. Most of the time, those switches are turned on or off in the same direction. But for whatever reason, perhaps in one twin, a few switches are in the opposite direction.
It remains a scientific mystery as to exactly what the environmental factors are that result in these epigenetic differences. But VILAIN and SANCHEZ maintain these differences almost certainly originate within the hormonal soup of the womb, not in the external environment in which each twin grows up.
Well, what we know from identical twin studies, even when twins are raised apart, if we were to bring them together and study them, that their personality traits seem to be very, very similar. And so for whatever reason, identical twins usually develop more similar to each other than not. When it comes to the nature-nurture debate, it's not one or the other, but it's an interaction of the two. And so even though you may have been given a certain type of biology, for instance, it's still under the influence of the environment.
So if it's a complex interplay between genes and the environment making one twin gay and the other straight, this still points to a biological basis. It's not like one of the twins chose to be gay or was made gay by his parents.
Hey, I've got one more question for you guys. I need to know which of you is gay and which of you is straight. So I'm gonna guess if you're okay with that. And I'm gonna rely on stereotypes, you know, a little bit of your gestures, your voice, and my impeccable gaydar says that it's you, Saul.
Oh, no.
No? What? You're joking, right?
I'm the straight one. I'm the gay one.
I should have known because you're wearing blue to pull out the blue of your eyes.
Yeah, that's totally
what
a
it was.
thing, right?
That was what it was.
There's no doubt some of us gays do fit the stereotype.
I love me
The question is, why?
There's a guy here who thinks there's truth behind the gay stereotypes. That's why I brought the fruit boots.
At the University of California in Fullerton, psychologist Richard LIPPA investigates the differences in abilities and interests between the sexes and between gay and straight men.
I have to ask the question, how do gay men differ from straight men?
Well, gay men are more like women in certain ways. For example, gay men have more feminine interests, more feminine occupational preferences.
What?
So, for example, you know, gay men are more interested in things like being, you know, a florist or an interior decorator or a nurse or a dancer or a social worker. And straight men in particular are more interested in being a truck driver, an engineer, a computer programmer. And, you know, that's just the truth. And it happens that there is some truth to that stereotype.
So gay men are more inclined towards dance than straight men.
Yes. The arts and dance and theater, I think it appeals to a cluster of maybe you could call personality traits or interests in gay men. It's expressive. It's people-oriented. It often deals with emotions and feelings. It deals with psychology. To be a dancer or to be a theater person, you have to understand people's motives and their inner feelings and desires. So, I think there's a whole cluster of reasons why gay men might be more attracted to certain kinds of fields.
So if what you're saying is right, I should be a good dancer.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. Geneticists talk about something called pleiotropy, which means one gene can have many different effects. So maybe there's a gene that has the effect of, making men more likely to be gay. Maybe there's a whole cluster of sort of feminine traits that are influenced by this gene.
So how was I?
You're average.
Okay, maybe we do have a natural affinity for the arts, but is that really enough to compensate for us all not reproducing? And by all of us, I mean like 3 to 5% of the population. That's like at least 200 million human beings. If Darwin was right and we did descend from animals, maybe our furry friends can give us a clue.
Primatologist Dr. Jean-Baptiste Lecca of the University of Lethbridge discovered a rare form of homosexual behavior among Japanese macaques.
In this particular all-male group, several males formed what we call consortships.
What's a consortship?
A consortship is a temporary but exclusive sexual relationships. The partners solicit each other for sex. They mount each other, sometimes in both directions. They do have a strong sexual relationships that can last from 20 minutes to a couple of days, sometimes even a couple of weeks.
So why is this happening?
They do travel together, they live together, so they have to get along. And maybe this form of sexual behaviors could be enacted as a way to make them bond and really get along socially.
Homosexual behavior has been known to serve all manners of social functions, especially within primate groups. But does this apply to humans?
By conducting specific analysis, particularly between great apes and humans, we might get hints. We might be able to trace back the origins and the evolution of human sexual behaviors.
Do you ever see cases of exclusive homosexuality?
We are pretty sure that this male homosexual behavior occurs in a heterosexual context. Most of these males will have sexual interactions with females later in their lives.
So it turns out Japanese macaques, like many other animal species, are more bisexual than exclusively gay. But I've heard of a place. It's a special place where the buffalo roam and the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, but you'll find many sheep who are gay. I'm in the beautiful treasure state of Montana, and I'm on the lookout for Dr. Ann Perkins and her damn gay sheep. Come on, let's go, Murphy. Howdy, you must be Ann.
Yeah, come on, I'll take you to the sheep.
Awesome, I'm really looking forward to this.
Biologist and professor of anthrozoology, Dr. Ann Perkins, did extensive research into the sexual orientation of sheep. Perkins now maintains that around 8% of rams are completely gay.
Exclusively gay sheep. Who knew? And I don't think you need me telling you, they didn't choose this lifestyle.
So come on in.
So I gotta know, what got you interested in gay sheep?
Well, I can tell you that, you know, when I was a little girl, I didn't say, when I grow up, I want to be a gay sheep researcher.
Right.
It wasn't like I was
It wasn't
looking,
written in the stars.
No, and I wasn't looking for that. I was actually doing research in male reproductive physiology with stallions. And when I got into my PhD work, I wanted to stay in the field that I was comfortable with, that is male reproductive physiology and behavior. There is a U.S. sheep experiment station in Idaho, and I thought that if I had access to many, many rams, I could work on developing a biological, physiological marker that would help producers find superior breeding rams.
Right, so you were looking for a biological marker for superior rams, but you
Right.
ended up discovering...
Homosexual orientation in sheep, yeah.
Wow.
The project began when American sheep farmers discovered that some of their alpha rams selected for prime breeding refused to mount the ewes. So Perkins came on board to investigate this phenomenon. They performed tests where these alphas had the option to mount either a female or a male, and some would only choose to mount the males.
You've discovered these homosexual rams, but what is making them gay?
A process happens very early in development in utero, and it sets the brain up to how they're going to perceive sexual partners as adults. What we were suspicious of was that something went on in the early in utero lives of these male-oriented rams, and they didn't develop male brains.
During early development, parts of the brain develop in a sexually dimorphic fashion, which means that there are differences between male and female. Perkins discovered that in the brains of the homosexual rams, their hypothalamus and limbic systems more closely resembled those of the female sheep.
Is this at all similar to humans? Like, what's really going on in the human brain? And I happen to have a human brain with me, so you can point it out.
Okay, Bryce. This part of the brain, be it human or sheep or rat or cat or dog, is where we have the brainstem and limbic system. This is where sex happens. This is where we survive and reproduce.
And the limbic system structures of the sheep aren't so different from the limbic system structures of humans. How we are different is how we process all that limbic system structure stuff.
So now I have the big question.
Okay.
What's making them gay? Like, why did this evolve to begin with?
Flies in the face of evolution, doesn't it?
It kind of does.
Yeah, okay.
And you are going to give me that answer, right?
Well, here's the answer, Bryce. I am a physiologist, and I'm trained in neurophysiology and neuroscience. And we look at the answers to how is it that the brain does this. And I've helped you with that, right, Bryce?
Yep, you're good. I'm good. I think I'm good.
But the why question is answered by the evolutionary biologists. They are the ones that look at why would something like this develop over time? You know, how can it be passed on? How can it exist?
From generation
if in fact,
to generation.
Yeah, if in fact it seems like it's not adaptive.
It must be, though.
Something's going on. Find out.
Yep.
Let me know.
All right, thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, homosexuality is clearly all over the animal kingdom, but how did it get here and why is it stuck around? Given evolution's rather uncompromising selection process,
there must be some kind of benefit that we provide for the survival of our species. And that's why I've come to Italy, to find out what part, if any, homosexuality plays in the bigger picture of evolution. The things I'll do for science! Homosexuals have been around since, well, forever. Now, you might think that the word homo comes from the Latin for human being, and you'd be right. But the homo in homosexual actually comes from the Greek for same, as in same sex. Those clever Greeks, they invented everything, including the Olympics, where, in the original version, everybody competed naked. Imagine that.
For sure, fabulous men have existed for as long as we can remember. Heck, probably before anyone learned how to write about them. Maybe you've heard something about those bathhouse-loving ancient Greeks and their fondness for Greco-Roman wrestling. And those rumors about Renaissance artist Michelangelo and his love of statuesque naked men. We're clearly a part of history, but why?
Bryce Sage is not the first young man to come to Italy in search of answers. Italy has fostered some of history's most revolutionary scientific thinkers.
This is the University of Padua, the same place that Copernicus and Galileo went.
I feel smarter just by being here.
This is also where anthropologist ANDREA CAMPERIO is trying to understand how homosexuality survives evolution when homosexuals do not generally reproduce.
My goal was to understand something new about sexual behavior and sexual orientation in an evolutionary perspective. The basic answer of Darwinism is that any behavior that is transmitted from generation to generation is transmitted by reproductive success.
So you know genes play a role, but that doesn't do anything to solve the evolution problem.
Okay, so here comes the story. This was a trip with my daughter, Georgia, 14 years old, and she looked at me and said, "Dad, did you ever realize or test if the same genetic factor that make mothers be more fecund, have larger family, are the same one that influence homosexuality in men?"
So in other words, this genetic factor could simply code for an attraction to men in general. When males receive it, they end up gay and don't reproduce. But when females receive it, they become more attracted to men and reproduce more often.
Now that's fine and dandy in theory, but to put it to the test, Professor CAMPERIO sent out a squad of his students to hit the streets and get some answers. They went all over town and interviewed hundreds of men, gay and straight. The goal? To figure out just how good their families are at producing babies.
After interviewing hundreds of subjects, CAMPERIO discovered that the female relatives of gay men had more children on average than those of straight men. How many more? 15 to 25%.
15 to 25% may not sound like much, but in terms of population numbers, it's huge. And it proves CAMPERIO theory that the so-called gay gene really does make women produce more babies.
Everyone was looking for genes for homosexuality, but what we found genes for fecundity that as a side product induce homosexuality, but they're so strong.
So wait, so I'm just a side effect of...
Yes.
Maybe this is what made me gay. I'm curious to see if CAMPERIO theory holds up in my own family.
Luckily, I don't leave home without my family tree, so why don't I give you a gander of mine?
So here you can see that in your family tree, your mother's side is producing much more offspring than your father's side.
In Bryce's family, the women on his mother's side have produced more children.
So if there are genetic factors in your mother's side, even if you are gay and you might not reproduce, you have plenty of representation.
So I might be a side effect as far as evolution is concerned, but at least in the end, all of the women in my family might be having more babies because of my genes.
Yes, you share a genetic strategy that I would say is rather successful.
I guess that's all right. I may not be very likely to have my own kids, but I may be responsible for expanding the family. All those extra nieces and nephews, maybe thanks to my genes. Well, what do I get? Nothing? Not even a card? There's gotta be more to this story. Maybe the modern day Western civilization is the wrong place to look.
So what about the mysterious third gender of Samoa? Will Bryce find a convincing answer in the South Pacific?
Yep.
In my ongoing quest to figure out why gay guys exist, I've come searching for an anthropologist who thinks we need to travel back in time to get the answers.
Bryce Sage has traveled all the way to the South Pacific, to the remote islands of independent Samoa, to be exact. He's here to meet a Canadian psychologist who has spent the past decade researching the role of homosexuals in Samoan extended families.
Dr. VASEY, I presume?
Welcome to Samoa.
In Samoa, a deeply religious society, no one openly acknowledges homosexual men, but they do accept a so-called third gender, the Fa'afafine.
All right, Paul, why come all the way to Samoa to do your research?
Well, I come here because there's a group of males who are exclusively attracted to other males, and they're called Fa'afafine, which in Samoan culture means in the manner of a woman.
I'd love to meet some of these Fa'afafine if you'd be willing to introduce me to them.
Hey, Trisha.
Wait, hi, Paul.
How are you?
Hi, I'm
good.
Bryce. So what kind of food are we having?
Oh, we have chicken, beef, the balsami, and a chicken soup with the taro.
And do you make these sort of meals every day?
Every day.
Every day. How big is the family that you're helping out with?
Oh, I got 12 people here in my family. My mom, my sisters, my brothers, and nieces and nephews.
Besides making the food, what other things do you do for the family?
Oh, for my family, I can help them a lot. I am the only one that work. I can work hard to get money, to buy food, to buy electricity, and everything for my family, especially my mom.
Oh, wow.
With this helping behavior, the Fa'afafine may give their families an evolutionary edge.
Well, kin selection, it's a general evolutionary hypothesis for understanding helping behavior, why helping behavior evolved. And that's an evolutionary paradox because so much of evolutionary theory is about survival of the fittest. Individuals behave in their own selfish interests, so why would they help others? Kin selection helps explain that.
The theory is that gay men like the Fa'afafine may not reproduce themselves, but they share about 50% of their genes with their brothers and sisters. So by helping support their nieces and nephews, the Fa'afafine increase the likelihood that those genes will pass on.
Hi, Teddy.
Hi.
How are you?
VASEY conducted extensive interviews in Samoa with Fa'afafine and with straight family members to see who was most responsible for childcare.
But 3 times a year you have to pay the school fees. Okay. And you help every time?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
No problem.
Do you pay all the school fees?
Yeah.
I found that the Fa'afafine were more invested in helping their nieces and nephews. So helping them in terms of babysitting, helping them with homework, paying for food, paying for school fees, paying for medicine or for doctors. So on all of these sorts of measures, Fa'afafine always scored higher in terms of their willingness to perform these activities than straight men or straight women. And no matter how many times we tested this hypothesis, we've tested it many, many times now, Fa'afafine always score higher for these measures.
So if I've got it right, the Fa'afafine are a kind of super uncle with super nurturing powers. But is that really enough to explain how we gay guys somehow defied natural selection?
It might not be enough. They might not be super uncle-ish enough to perpetuate these genes over evolutionary time. There might be other processes that work in concert with kin selection to maintain these genes.
So is there anything else you could investigate?
We found that the mothers and the grandmothers of Fa'afafine produce more offspring than the mothers and grandmothers of straight men.
Oh, I heard about that one in Italy.
Right, so you know that Andrea found this effect only on the mother's side of the family. Here in Samoa, we found it on the mother's side of the family and on the father's side of the family.
So it's almost as if these powerful forces of evolution are working together to ensure our survival.
In Samoa, Paul Vasey's work supports the view that two evolutionary mechanisms coexist to help gay genes survive over time.
Samoa sure is a fascinating place. These Fa'afafine, the third gender of the community, they really are indispensable to their families and are therefore protected by them. It's kind of an evolutionary deal. And maybe it really does explain how we gay men survive generations of natural selection.
And how do I say thank you?
Fafatai.
Fafatai.
It sure is interesting, but this is a very different expression of homosexuality. Identifying as gay the way I can back home in Canada is illegal here in Samoa.
The Fa'afafine have a special role in Samoan society. But anti-gay discrimination prevents them from being openly gay in the way that Bryce might take for granted. By simple Darwinian logic, homosexuality should have been weeded out eons ago. But the evidence is now showing why it survives all over the world. Between genes and hormones, there are multiple causes of homosexuality and just as many explanations for it.
In some ways, I still don't know specifically what makes me the way that I am. The answers just aren't black and white. The one thing I do know, my attraction to the same sex is hardwired and very much biological in nature. It isn't something that's going to change. It isn't a lifestyle, and it certainly wasn't a choice. It's just a part of who I am. So here's to survival of the fabulous.